Hello and welcome to another episode of the Corner 3 here on Pittsburgh Sports Live. As always, I'm your host, Cale Berger, and we are in the thick of NBA playoff action. Each series is about 2 games into the first round of the NBA playoffs, and once again, it's going to be an all-NBA show here today with college basketball over, right in the thick of it. And the first thing I want to touch on before I touch on some of my 5 biggest takeaways from the first 2 games of the first round, some of the trends I'm seeing, some of the issues I'm seeing, and some of the things that are leading some of those teams have some great performances thus far, and the stars that have really started to shine. I'm going to talk about, I guess, the biggest topic right now in the NBA outside of the playoffs, and that is the MVP debate. It is one of the closest we have seen in recent memory in maybe the last 10 years or so. James Harden of the Houston Rockets or Giannis Antetokounmpo of the Milwaukee Bucks. Both guys have been fantastic all year. Both guys have led their teams to the playoffs. The Rockets are playing some fantastic basketball right now against the Utah Jazz, up 2-0 in that series, as the Bucks and Giannis are up 2-0 in their series against the Detroit Pistons, and they've completely handled them. But I wanted to take a look at these two guys, what makes both of them so great, and who I think would be my pick to be the MVP if I had a choice. But like I said, both guys have been absolutely fantastic. But I do think that there's one guy who is more deserving of a Most Valuable Player award, if that'll, be kind of a tease there. There's one guy who I think is more deserving of that Most Valuable Player. But as we look at the two guys, when you look at their stats, there's not that much separation between the two of them. I mean, James Harden's averaging 36 points per game to lead the NBA, which is ridiculous. Scoring numbers we haven't seen since the days of Kobe Bryant in his prime. He's averaging 6.6 rebounds, 7.5 assists as well, shooting 44% from the field. He's got a player efficiency rating of 30.6, which is fantastic, which is incredible, and past MVPs have all been around that 30 mark in player efficiency rating. But there's a guy who is ahead of him in that category, and that is Giannis Antetokounmpo with a PER of 30.9. You look at Giannis' stats, he's led the Bucks to 60 wins, the only team to get to 60 wins all year this NBA season. He's averaging 27.7, 12.5 rebounds, and just under 6 assists a game, while shooting just under 58% from the field, which is completely ridiculous. Like I said, with that 30.9 PER. But here's the interesting kind of, dynamic between these two guys. Is James Harden's had this phenomenal season because the Houston Rockets started out 1-5. Clint Capella got hurt. Chris Paul got suspended and then got hurt as well. So 2 of their big-time guys were missing injury or missing time due to injury or suspension. They also lost 2 important guys in Trevor Ariza and Luka Mbamute, 2 of their better three-point shooters and defenders over the offseason as well. So a lot of moving parts for the Rockets all season, and they didn't get off to a very good start. Well, James Harden realized that he had to take things into his own hands. He came to the conclusion that he needed to will this team into playoff contention, and that is exactly what he's done. I mean, he went on that incredible scoring streak where he was averaging 40 points per game, where for it seemed like forever. He had 40-point games, he had 50-point games. I mean, he had a phenomenal year. And he single-handedly brought the Rockets into being, I believe, a 3 seed. Yeah, he brought them all the way to the 3 seed in the Western Conference, from being a team at one point that was out of the playoff picture simply with his play. And we all know he's got the unblockable step-back jumper. He's got the handles. He can get anywhere he wants on the floor to score the basketball. He's probably the best scorer in the league right now, if not second to KD, and Steph Curry is obviously in that discussion as well. But offensively, he's just been unstoppable. When you look at Giannis Antetokounmpo, he's also been unstoppable, a freak, as his nickname suggests. But the big thing about Giannis is he has been absolutely dominant. He has been dominating people in a way that we haven't seen maybe since Shaquille O'Neal in his prime. I mean, he can get to the rim at will. He's dunking on everybody. I think he has the NBA record for most unassisted dunks in a season, and he has that record by like 70 or something along those lines. I mean, he is just driving to the rim, dunking on everybody, and no one seems to be able to stop him. The only hope you kind of have is if you somehow force him to take a jump shot, and even then, he's getting better at that. But it's a question of a guy who has single-handedly willed his team with a lot of guys injured, a lot of guys missing time because of suspension or injury, and a guy who has just been completely and utterly dominant the entire season. And when I look at the debate between these two, I have to go with James Harden. I know Giannis has been incredible. He's probably the third best player in the league right now if we're talking LeBron, KD. I think Giannis is that third best player in the league. I mean, because he is so dominant, such a physical freak. But you look at the Milwaukee Bucks, and Giannis, he's got help. He has another all-star in Chris Middleton. He has Brook Lopez, who's shooting the best three-point percentage and knocking down the most threes of his entire career to stretch the floor for him. He's got Eric Bledsoe as well. He's got solid role players around him. And he's got a fantastic coach, who's probably going to win Coach of the Year, Mike Budenholzer. Not that the Rockets don't have a great coach in Mike D'Antoni, because I really do like Mike D'Antoni. But you look at this Rockets team that James Harden was playing, or that was playing on most of this season. Like I said, Chris Paul and Clint Capella both missed significant time. So that left it to be him, Eric Gordon, PJ Tucker, and a mix of guys like Gerald Green, Nene. They added Iman Shumpert later on in the year, Austin Rivers, Kenneth Faried, who came in and was a big help to them and was very productive, but he's no Clint Capella. So you look at James Harden, when you're talking about who's the most valuable player to their team, and this seems to be always the debate that we get to, is who's more valuable, who is the best player. If we talk about who's the best player that season, it could probably be LeBron James for the last 5 years or so. He'd probably have like 10 MVPs. But the name of the award is the most valuable player. Who's the most valuable to their team? And I think James Harden has been more valuable to the Houston Rockets than Giannis Antetokounmpo has to the Bucks. Would the Bucks be awful without Giannis? Absolutely. They'd be a lottery team. But I think the Rockets would not be in their current situation, or would not be as good as they are, if not for James Harden. And for that, I think James Harden should be the MVP. And as both guys have had great seasons, and once again we go back to the stats, you look at just field goals. James Harden has the most field goals of anyone in the league this season. You look at points per game. James Harden is leading points per game by way ahead of the pack in points per game this season. I mean, he's been on an absolute scoring tear. And Giannis has been great as well. I mean, he does everything. He leads the team, I believe, in steals, in blocks. I'm not sure of assists, but definitely in rebounds and scoring. But James Harden has just been more critical to the success of the Rockets than Giannis has been to the Bucks. If not for James Harden, the Rockets would also be a lottery team. But if he did not go off and do these scoring things and play this marvelous, potent brand of basketball that he does, the Rockets would have no chance of being in the position they are right now, which is up 2-0 in the first round against the Utah Jazz. So for that, I think James Harden's the player that is more valuable to his team. He's had an incredible season. I think as much as we talk about efficiency and doing all the things, we marvel at LeBron because he's been able to be a great distributor. He's been a great rebounder and a defender and everything. I think we do need to add some value back to scoring the basketball. And this is a guy who's scoring the basketball at a better rate than we have seen since the prime of Kobe Bryant. And I think we need to recognize that, and I think we need to reward that by giving the MVP to the Houston Rockets, James Harden. But with that, now I want to get to my 5 biggest takeaways from the first 2 games from each series of the first round. I'm not going to touch on every series here. We don't have all day. And there's been some series that frankly haven't been very good. I mean, we talked about the Bucks and the Pistons. Blake Griffin's missed both games so far. He's probably going to miss the entire series. Even after an all-NBA caliber season, he's been fantastic, and that's why the Pistons are in the playoffs. This series has been atrocious, and the Bucks have just done whatever they want. So, I'm going to go to my 5 biggest takeaways from the first 2 games, where I think these teams need to improve, the trends I'm seeing, who's been stellar, who's been subpar, and we're going to see if they're going to be able to change these things or improve on them as the first round goes on and into the later rounds of the playoffs. So, my first takeaway, the Philadelphia 76ers, it's 1-1 against the Brooklyn Nets in their series, and my biggest takeaway from the Sixers is They need everything to go right with that starting five of theirs, that potent, talented, highly touted starting five. They need everything to go right with those five players if they want to win. What I've seen in the first two games is some great, gritty, hard-nosed basketball from the Brooklyn Nets, exactly what I think everyone expected. But what they've been doing is they've been daring everyone in the Sixers starting lineup outside of J.J. Redick, daring them to shoot outside shots, daring them to shoot threes. We understand that is the game plan when you play against Ben Simmons usually. That's what everyone's done, and he has not developed a jump shot since then. But they've been really trying to just run J.J. Redick off the three-point line as much as they can, make him take layups, and pretty much just play some great defense and dare everyone else in that starting lineup to shoot. Now, in the first game, that worked to perfection. The Nets were able to get the win. In the second game, though, the Sixers able to win the second game and tie the series at 1-1 apiece with a 145-123 victory. Now, you look at the 123 put up by Brooklyn. Yes, the Sixers did not play really great defense at all. And that's something they're going to have to do. They don't have very good perimeter defense outside of Joel Embiid. There's no true, outside of Joel Embiid and Jimmy Butler, I don't think the other guys in their starting lineup or coming off the bench are necessarily plus defenders. I mean, obviously, Jimmy Butler is one of the best perimeter defenders there is in the league, and Joel Embiid is a fantastic rim protector. But outside those guys, I don't look at Ben Simmons and say, oh, he's going to lock somebody down. I don't look at Tobias Harris and say he's going to be able to stay in front of some of these smaller, quicker 2 guards and 3 guards, and even maybe some of the more spry 4s in the league he's going to go up against. And J.J. Redick, we know he's not a guy that's in the game because he's going to lock somebody down. He's in there so he can knock down 3-point shots. So the defense is another thing. They just need to play better defensively. But you look at what they did offensively in Game 2. And, Tobias Harris had 19 points. He was plus 30 while he was on the floor, plus minus. Joel Embiid got 23 and 10. Ben Simmons was very aggressive in this game after having a really poor performance in the first game, was even booed by the fans in Philly because, Philly gonna Philly, which he was pretty upset about, and he was fairly adamant about in the post-game press conference. He came back with a great performance. He was aggressive. He was driving the lane. He was kicking out to shooters. Ended up with 18 points, 10 rebounds, and 12 assists. A playoff triple-double for Ben Simmons. Jimmy Butler didn't have a great shooting night, but they were able to survive it because the other guys picked up the slack for him. I don't expect Jimmy Butler to have those performances in the future. He's always been a consistent, good playoff performer. But he had 7 points, but he was plus 27 while he was on the floor, plus minus. He didn't turn the ball over. He got a steal. He had 7 assists. He got 4 rebounds. So he kind of contributed in other ways. And J.J. Redick had 17 points, 2 for 5 from 3. So everyone kind of played their part in the starting lineup, I think, outside of Jimmy Butler. But like I said, contributed in other ways. They need Ben Simmons to be as aggressive as he was in Game 2 to be successful. When Ben Simmons is passive, sitting back, just trying to simply be a distributor, that's when this team, when their faults truly show. And that's when they get in dangerous situations, is when Ben Simmons is not full speed ahead, head down, attacking the basket, because he's 6'8", he's 230, 240. He's a big dude, a powerful player who can get to the rim at will if he tried to play like a LeBron, if he tried to play like a Giannis. And listen, I'm not saying Ben Simmons needs to step back and take, 3-point shots or be taking 22-foot jumpers. That's not his game. We all know that. But he can be aggressive. He can get to the line. He can get into the paint and finish at the rim, and he needs to do that aggressively. If he's not doing that, everyone can key in on Redick, Jimmy, and Joel and pack the paint, and that's where the Sixers team gets in danger. The other thing, though, is they actually got some contributions from the bench as well. 15 points from Mike Scott, who's 3 for 5 from 3, and 16 points for Boban Marjanovic. He took 14 shots and hit 8 of them, which I found completely ridiculous. I didn't think he would ever be capable of this sort of offensive performance, but sure enough, 16 points for Boban. But you can't rely on that in the future. Mike Scott's not going to give you 15, and Marjanovic is not going to give you 16, shooting 8 of 14. First of all, I don't know why he's shooting 14 shots. That's a whole other story. But you're not going to get 16 points out of Boban Marjanovic, maybe ever again. At least I don't think in this playoff. So that being said, it is all reliant on this starting five to play their best basketball for the remainder of the playoffs if they want to get to the finals and beat, potentially, whoever they face there from the Western Conference. But if they don't get consistently strong performances from at least 4 out of 5 of those guys in the starting lineup, then the Sixers are definitely in danger of getting limited by the Nets or getting knocked out of the playoffs in the next round if they're able to get past Brooklyn. But like we said, Tobias Harris, Joel Embiid, Ben Simmons, J.J. Redick, all with great performances in Game 2. Jimmy Butler, subpar, but contributed in other ways. They have to have that starting five. It was all about the starting five when they made the trade for Tobias Harris. You know what? It was all about the starting five when they made the trade for Jimmy Butler, let alone adding Tobias Harris later this season. So this starting five, the Sixers are going to go as far as this starting five goes. If they play great basketball from here on out, they're going to be the most dangerous team in the Eastern Conference. If they have similar performances where Ben Simmons is not aggressive, where Joel Embiid is passive and kind of just out of the loop, then they're going to have they're going to face elimination. But if they play the way they're capable, I think they can go all to the NBA Finals. But it's going to be at least 4 out of 5 of those guys every night having strong performances. So we'll see if they're able to continue that and can get that going in Game 3 like they did in Game 2. Second takeaway, the Warriors are beatable. We saw the 31-point comeback by the Clippers the other night in Game 2, which was the largest comeback in NBA playoff history for a team that we talked about last week as a bunch of journeymen in the NBA. We have Lou Williams, Patrick Beverley, Montrezl Harrell, a bunch of guys that, Danilo Gallinari, a bunch of guys that don't jump off the page at you. The star on this team is Lou Williams, but, I mean, he's not an all-star caliber player. He's not an all-NBA guy, but he is their star. But they came with the biggest comeback in NBA playoff history against the Warriors the same night that DeMarcus Cousins goes down with an injury just about a minute or so into the game. It seems like he's going to miss the entire playoffs with a quad injury. Kevin Durant is pretty much non-existent. I mean, you look at his scoring output in that game, he had like 9 points or something along those lines. I mean, he was not very good at all. Clearly having some difficulty playing against Patrick Beverley, who, even though he's got like 9 inches on him, he's giving him trouble. He's getting up in him. He's making things difficult for him. He's denying the ball. Kevin Durant talked about this in shoot-around yesterday. He's getting up in his grill. He's trying to be a pest. He's trying to mess with him. And they both got ejected out of this game. That was part of the reason why Golden State gave up this lead, because one of the best scorers in the league was not in there because he got ejected from a scuffle with Patrick Beverley. But still, or I believe that was in Game 1 where he got ejected. But, I mean, Kevin Durant had 21 points in this game. Boogie had the 2 points before he got injured. Steph came out and had 30. But my biggest fear with the Warriors is that you lose Boogie Cousins, and they're another team like the Sixers. It's all about the starting five. And the reason for that is a big advantage of the Warriors, over the last few years has been their depth. You have that fantastic big three or big four over the last 2 years of Curry, Draymond, Clay, and Durant. When those guys go out, though, you have that second unit of Sean Livingston, of Iguodala, of JaVale McGee. I mean, they've always had solid, reliable bench guys that can come in and keep the charge going when you're up by 10 through one quarter against the team. I mean, they just buried people. You add DeMarcus Cousins, some of those other guys go elsewhere to play after this past offseason. And the Warriors now, another team where it's all relying on that starting five. Now, it's the best starting five in basketball, one of the best starting fives we've probably ever seen. But, once those guys get out of the game or someone's having an off night, who's that guy on the bench to pick up the slack? I mean, is it Quinn Cook? I don't think so. Is it Andrew Bogut now? Is it Jordan Bell? Jordan Bell played 4 minutes in Game 2. I mean, it could be Iguodala, but Iguodala is getting up there in age. He had 9 points in Game 2, but he was 1 for 5 from 3. He had 2 turnovers. So if this Warriors starting lineup doesn't play to its best, then I think they're a beatable team. They don't play to their full potential. But when you have a case now where DeMarcus Cousins, that fifth option, that fifth weapon that they added this offseason, when he is now out for the playoffs, are now stepping into that role is Kevin Looney, is Andrew Bogut, is Jordan Bell, guys that are serviceable, and Kevin Looney certainly had a good performance with 19 points in Game 2, but I don't anticipate Kevin Looney having that performance going forward. Andrew Bogut's not going to give that to you. Jordan Bell's not going to do that. So even though they still have 4 All-NBA caliber players, once those guys check out of the game, you go to that second unit. It is barren. It is a desert. Where are you going to find the scoring from? So we saw from the Clippers when, some guys are having off nights. Kevin Durant, he only took 8 shots. If you're Kevin Durant, you are the second best basketball player in the world. And you take 8 shots in a playoff game. I know it's the Warriors. It's everyone gets a turn at share, but you are still Kevin Durant. And to me personally, and we'll probably talk about this on later shows, he looks to be out the door already. He looks uninterested. He looks fed up. He looks to be annoyed with this whole Warriors experiment that he's done with the culture. He looks bored because he won 2 titles and no one gave him credit for it. And now he's kind of like, well, I need to leave so I can get some titles that'll be worth something. I understand that. But he looks like he's already checked out 2 games into the playoffs, which is bad for the Warriors because if Kevin Durant is not fully focused and you run into a team, a buzzsaw like the Clippers, who has aggressive defenders, who has guys that no one can guard, like Lou Williams, no one's been able to guard him, you run into problems and you're beatable like they were against the Clippers. So I think the Warriors are still the cream of the crop in the NBA. I think they're still the team that's going to be the favorite to win the title. But I think they are vulnerable, and I think they're beatable now. We've seen they're not going to go 16-0 through the playoffs. I mean, we saw the Clippers were able to come back on them, beat them in Game 2 with that 31-point comeback, and not having Boogie Cousins now for the foreseeable future. If that starting 5 does not get it done, if Draymond Green goes out and shoots 3 for 12 or something, and Clay and Steph have okay nights, Durant's fine, that's a recipe for disaster for the Warriors, and a scenario that I'm not sure will happen for 4 games in a series because I'm not sure I see anyone eliminating them, but it's certainly a scenario that can make things more difficult for them going forward here. My third takeaway, Houston's playing its best basketball, and they can beat anyone in this field. I think the Houston Rockets, who were a team last year that gave the Warriors a run for their money until the injury to Chris Paul, they're fantastic, and they might not have the depth, like I said, like they've had in past years, but other guys have started to step up. They have a reliable bench. They have solid role players in P.J. Tucker, Eric Gordon, Clint Capella. Chris Paul and James Harden are playing off each other beautifully right now. James Harden, like we talked about at the beginning of the show, 36 points per game. He's been fantastic, and they have completely just demoralized the Jazz, and it's like the Jazz have already been eliminated from the series, and they're only down 2-0. And the threat of James Harden, the fear of having to defend James Harden, has completely broken the Utah Jazz. And by that I mean the Utah Jazz are one of the best defenses in the NBA this season, especially in the Western Conference. And going into this series, they completely decided to throw out what they were doing all year defensively, try to force James Harden to his right, and all James Harden has done is crossed up Ricky Rubio into next year and dropped 30 points on them in both games. And that's a testament to how dangerous this team is offensively. With Mike D'Antoni's style, with Chris Paul and James Harden playing off each other, with Clint Capella now playing like a star at the center position. I mean, he is fantastic and complements both those players perfectly. I think the Houston Rockets are one of the most confident teams right now in the NBA. I think they have the most dangerous scorer in the NBA, and I think they can legitimately beat anyone in this series, in the playoffs right now. So it's going to be really interesting to see. I think they will face the Warriors in the second round if they were to advance, and the Warriors were to advance. So that'd be a really fun series, and see how that one pans out. It won't be the Western Conference Finals like it was last year, but still, I think Houston is playing fantastic basketball right now, playing with confidence, and there's nothing more dangerous than that during the NBA playoffs. My fourth takeaway, I've been telling you it's going to happen for, 6 months now, 4 months. I mean, I feel like I have been talking about this and forecasting it to happen for months now, but it finally seems like it's taking hold, and that is the Boston Celtics are finally starting to hit their stride. And you know what it came down to? It came down to just everyone accepting their damn role and putting their shots aside, what they want, putting that aside, and realizing that this team is at their best when Kyrie Irving is the dynamic scorer that he is, and he's able to play that role as the hero, and Al Horford's able to just do a little bit of everything as a rebounder, as a scorer, and as a facilitator, also a defender. But when guys finally just take their roles, take their lumps, and understand, okay, I need to take less shots, I need to defer to Kyrie, now they're playing good basketball. And you know what? They may not be lighting it up, scoring the basketball in these first two games against the Pacers, who are a great defensive team, who are a very gritty team. But they are getting efficient shots, they're knocking down shots when they have to, and they're playing exceptional defense of their own. I mean, they have not scored over 100 in both games so far, but they've completely shut down the Indiana Pacers. So I think the scoring will come for the Celtics, but what I will say is I think they finally bought into the defensive mindset and the defensive style of Brad Stevens for this playoff run, because they've certainly done it in past years. But I think they've also kind of figured out offensively what they're going to do. I mean, their plan is going to be Kyrie Irving's our number one option, Jason Tatum's the 2, Al Horford as the 3rd option as a facilitator and as a scorer, and then you have Gordon Hayward coming off the bench in a 6-man role, and that certainly started to look like a plan, and it certainly started to look like it is going to work through the first 2 games of their first-round series against the Indiana Pacers. And my final takeaway, this is kind of a 2-part one, so maybe it's 6 takeaways from the first 2 games of the first round, and that is this Portland team is legit, and the Thunder, I think, are fool's gold or mirage. They've certainly hoodwinked many of us, especially myself, who predicted they would win this series. Now I'm predicting they will not. I don't think they have a chance to end up winning this series against the Trailblazers. The Trailblazers have just been fantastic. And I say that not just looking at Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum's play, but also losing Yusuf Nurkic and having Enes Kanter step into that role. He has been an absolute stud against his former team, the Oklahoma City Thunder. I mean, he has been rebounding the basketball. He's been scoring the basketball. He's been making some nice passes out of the low post to those cutting guards in Damian Lillard, in CJ McCollum, and the role players as well. I mean, this is a Portland team that defends, a Portland team with dynamic guards, probably the second best backcourt in the entire league. Right behind Golden State. But, I mean, Damian Lillard is playing some of the best basketball of his career, and it's funny because he's had this recurring kind of rivalry with Russell Westbrook, where, you know, they talk a little bit, they jab at each other back and forth, but if you look over the last year or so, or the last few months, I mean, he has certainly gotten the better of Russell Westbrook in recent history here. I mean, he has been scoring the basketball. He's been knocking down long-range threes that are virtually unguardable. He's been distributing. He's been finding open looks for his teammates. And he's playing with a swagger and an arrogance that you honestly love to see, because Damian Lillard is not a loud guy, but he's a proud player. And he is a confident player, I guess the word. I was going to say arrogant, but I don't think he's an arrogant guy. He's a confident player, and he's a proud player who's not going to talk. He's going to do a lot of the talking with his play on the floor. But you see him. He's kind of giving looks to Russell Westbrook. He's chatting a little bit. He's, you know, celebrating when Russell Westbrook misses a shot, coming down, pulling up from 30 feet out and knocking down a 3 in his face. I mean, he has been a stud so far in this playoffs. In Portland, you know, with that tandem of McCollum and Lillard, with Enes Kanter down low as kind of the enforcer role, this is a team that I think is very dangerous and I think is going to put their playoff woes behind them. CJ McCollum saying, hey, you're welcome, Jennifer. He had that instance a few years ago where, you know, a woman on Twitter named Jennifer was saying, hey, how about you win a playoff game or something like that? And he said, I'm trying, Jennifer. And it became a meme. It became a joke on social media. And someone asked him after game 1 when they finally won the playoff game against the Thunder, they said, did you do it for Jennifer? And he said, yeah. You know, he laughed at it, but he certainly did it for Jennifer, and you can tell that they were motivated and that they had something to prove in this playoffs after getting swept the last 2 years in the first round. And they've certainly proved something thus far, leading 2-0 over the Oklahoma City Thunder. I look at the Thunder and I have a lot of confidence on them going in. I mean, I think they were a team with a good bench, 2 good stars that knew their roles, but it seems like that's kind of all gone out the window. I mean, playoff P, as we heard about last year against Utah, he shrunk to, I guess, a fraction of himself. I mean, Paul George has been pretty lackluster, I would say, over these first 2 games of this series. He had a really poor shooting performance in the first game where he couldn't get a shot to fall no matter where he took it from. Was attributing that to a shoulder injury he'd been I guess dealing with or trying to fight off for the last few weeks here. But he came out before game 2 and said there's no pain in the shoulder. And, he was better in game 2, but he certainly wasn't fantastic, I guess would be the way to put it. If we check out the box score here, he was much better in game 2, but he still couldn't shoot it from long range very well, 2 of 7. He had 5 turnovers, so he just doesn't look comfortable out there. He did have 27 points, as it looks like we're losing MJ over there. It's because the Bulls aren't in the playoffs. Here we go. But he looks to be uncomfortable out there. Whereas you look at Russell Westbrook, and Russell, as things are starting to get tough here, Damian Lillard and his play is starting to get in his head a little bit. He's starting to revert back to the Russell Westbrook of old, of let me play hero ball, let me try to do everything. And that's a lot of what allowed the Thunder to have success this year is Russell Westbrook finally taking a back seat and saying, okay, I can be Robin, I'll let Paul George be Batman. And while Paul George did have 27 points in this game, 8 rebounds, he did have the 5 turnovers, Russell Westbrook was pretty bad. He had 6 turnovers of his own to lead the team. He had 14 points, 11 assists, 9 rebounds, so near triple-double, but you look at those shooting numbers, 5 of 20 from the field and 1 for 6 from 3. And when Russ is shooting his own team out of the game, that is a recipe for disaster for the Thunder. And someone needs to tell him, hey, you need to relax. You need to trust the process. I hate to use that phrase when it's not related to the Sixers, but it's true. You need to trust that our game plan is going to work. And as they go back home, maybe the Thunder will be able to get some home cooking to help them a little bit. But I think this Portland team is just playing on another level, and I'm not sure that anyone else is going to be able to, or I'm not sure that the Thunder, that being said, are going to be able to rise to the occasion or turn this around. I think the damage has been done in this series, and I think we'll get a gentleman's sweep out of it, to be quite honest. I think Thunder will come back, win Game 3. I think the Trailblazers win Game 4, and then go back to Portland and win Game 5 to close out the series. So with that, to recap, looking at the MVP debate, I think it's going to be James Harden. I think he's the most valuable player to his team in the league. 36 points per game, 30.6 player efficiency rating. He's been absolutely stellar, and he's playing that same way in the playoffs through 2 games. And my biggest takeaways, 76ers, they need everything with that starting 5 to go right if they want to win and get to where they ultimately want to go, which is the finals. The Warriors, they're beatable, and they're thin, but still probably the favorite. Houston playing the best basketball of their season, maybe the best basketball of anyone right now, and they can beat anyone in the playoff field. And the Celtics finally starting to hit that stride that I've been forecasting for the last few months here. They're finally doing it, finally making me, validate what I had said about them all season. And Portland, they're legit. They have a legit backcourt. They have a legit center. They are dangerous. And the Thunder need to fix something fast, or they are going to get a gentleman's sweep, or maybe even swept out of the first round by those same Trailblazers. So with that, that'll do it for us here. Again, another edition of the Corner 3 on Pittsburgh Sports Live. As always, make sure you subscribe at Pittsburgh Sports Live on YouTube. Helps us out a lot. Helps us keep this thing going. Let me know what you think about the show in the comments section, or follow me, tweet me on Twitter at Cale_Berger. You can also follow at Pittsburgh Sports Live on Twitter to stay up to date with all of our latest videos, player interviews, everything we got going on here at Pittsburgh Sports Live. But once again, that'll do it for another edition of the Corner 3. We'll be back, the Corner 3 on Pittsburgh Sports Live. See you next week.